When you're preparing a claim that is secondary versus direct, how are they different from an evidence gathering perspective?
That's a great question. So in a weird way, it's kind of the same, but you slide your nexus is what you're doing, and you eliminate your need to prove your service because you've already done that. So it's important, I think, to start with what's a normal claim take, and I'll do the very fast version, right? So you have a service-connected condition that is not a presumptive, that's not a presumptive. You need to have your time in service. That creates that window of opportunity, the entry date, exit date. You need to have your diagnosed condition that's chronic in nature or has residual effects. You need to have the nexus, the link between the condition and your time in service. Okay, once you establish that, you get your service-connected condition. Great. Now that service-connected condition causes another problem, either because of its actual attributes, right? Your bad right knee created problems with your left knee, making it a bad left knee, right? Because you're overcompensating when you're walking, whatever. Or your bad back started to give you elbow issues because you're constantly pushing yourself out of chairs and that type of stuff. So now your elbows and shoulders start to go. As we age, Clay, it's going to happen to you. There's a lot to kind of think about as you connect all these things together. So when you find out that you have a condition that is potentially secondary to your service-connected condition, either by its attributes or medication, right, Clay? I mean, medication can cause issues too. So once you identify that, I feel, this is me, that it's really important that you really hammer home on the point, and I'm going to let you talk about the other side of this where you don't need to do this. I feel like a lot of conditions, you really need to hammer home the point that your service-connected condition has caused this new diagnosed condition. Okay, so two things need to happen. You need to get to answer your question. You need to get diagnosed for that secondary condition. You can't just think it. You actually have to go get diagnosed for it. Then you need to create a nexus between it, your new diagnosed secondary condition, and the service-connected condition that has caused it. Now, an easy way would be, hey, doc, can you do me a favor? This condition that you've been treating me for has now caused this one. Can you write me a little letter that just says that because of this condition has now resulted? I need that so that way I can file it with the VA so I can get reimbursed for my medical expenses. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Hugs and kisses and move on your way. So I think that that's the two big things. You must get diagnosed for your secondary condition, and you must create that nexus, that link. I feel most conditions you need to have that really pointed out to the VA. You're not making it up. You're not saying that, my hangnail has now caused my left knee to go out, right? You need to have a doctor connect that. Now, I know, Clay, and you do a great job explaining this, and this is why I'm not going to explain it, because I love how you do it. Explain maybe a circumstance that can result from an injury or whatever, that maybe it's already kind of nexus in the world. Clay.
Yeah, so that really gets at, what I'm going to call easy secondaries and hard secondaries. The hard secondaries, 1,000%, which is redundant, by the way. You absolutely need to establish that nexus. I'm not saying private nexus, but we'll talk more on what that nexus looks like. For the easy secondaries, where the nexus is in the evidence, meaning like an X-ray. If a condition is X-rayed, and probably the most common secondary you'll see X-rayed that will not require it does require a nexus, but not in the sense that we're talking about it still. If, let's say, your lower lumbar spine is pinching the nerve, and you can see that on an X-ray, and now you have radiculopathy, you have diagnosed nerve damage in your legs, it's right there. That is probably the most, I'm willing to bet money, that is the most common secondary service-connected condition. That is service-connected out the gate. Extremely common. It's on the DBQ for back, and so it's a part of that DBQ. So often what will happen is you'll submit a lower back claim like I did. I did not submit for radiculopathy. Because it's on the DBQ, I also had a stellar CMP examiner. That's a very big factor here. But that CMP examiner also service-connected radiculopathy in both left and right because it is so common. It's an easy secondary. And that evidence is really the diagnosis. And I want to point out something, Jason. You had mentioned the big two. The biggest two factors of secondaries apart from direct claims or initial claims is the diagnosis. Yes, for every claim ever, you need a chronic diagnosis. I know that. But for secondaries, that criteria is even higher. So for instance, for a direct claim, if I have treatment records, I haven't been formally diagnosed, I haven't got that international classification of diseases or an ICD code, the CMP examiner can still make the diagnosis during the CMP exam. I always recommend against that. Obviously, you want to submit that evidence-based claim, but most claims, the CMP examiner makes the diagnosis, especially if you're coming out of service, going straight into that VA claim. For secondaries, it's the complete opposite. There's no way you're going to say, hey, I think I have sleep apnea. I'm going to submit sleep apnea secondary to mental health and that be service connected. There's probably like 2% of all sleep apnea claims secondary that have been service connected that way. And I cannot stand seeing secondary claims submitted without a diagnosis. Absolutely get your diagnosis. And then you also brought up the nexus, building the nexus. And we're outside of the easy secondaries right now. If it's an x-ray, there it is. That's your proof. If it's something that's like mental health secondary to lower back, that cannot be x-rayed. And so that nexus, and you hit the nail on the head. And I'm going to go a little deeper into what you said about building that nexus with your evidence and saying, hey, my condition really is causing that secondary condition. So my lower back really is causing me to be depressed. The doctor, your psychiatrist, your psychologist, whoever you see regularly at the VA or private, you talk about that. You not only get the diagnosis, but you're like, hey, my lower spine is so severe, I can't play catch with my son. I can't enjoy my kid's life. And that over time, that will make you depressed. My daughter, she just turned 7 yesterday, as we're recording
Happy
this,
birthday.
right? Yeah. And she has a little Mario Kart big wheel that goes like 10 miles per hour. And I'll hop in that thing and take her around with it. Okay. And my back does hurt. I'm only rated 10% for my back. But if I was 40% for my back, I'm probably not getting in this is what I look like when I'm driving this thing. And it's fun, right? But if I can enjoy those moments with my kids, over time, that will lead to depression. And so that's the evidence you need to build. You could say manufacture if you want, but with your primary care, and then submitting that evidence-based claim is a lot better than saying, hey, VA, I think I'm depressed and I think it came from my back. Can you figure that out for me? Because what you're asking the VA to do, they're gonna have their duty to assist. That's gonna happen. You're gonna have a CMP exam, and it's like what, maybe if you're lucky, maybe 30 minutes, probably really like 10, 15 minutes of you explaining to your CMP examiner who hasn't looked at your medical records, who probably briefly looked at whatever the VA sent them. And now you're relying on that person in a one-time visit to make that connection. It's too hard for the CMP examiner to do without concrete evidence. And that's really when someone says, I'm submitting a secondary claim, my first question is always, okay, well, what evidence do you have that indicates that condition stemmed from the secondary? I can tell you 99% of the time, the answer is, oh, I don't have any. And I'm like, okay, well, you already submitted the claim. You're already down that road. I would go ahead and prepare for denial and then start gathering that evidence to indicate for the supplemental appeal. But yeah, that's really my 2 cents on preparing evidence. Did that spark any thoughts for you, Jason?